Well, after a few-week hiatus, we are back here. Congress is still out of session, but we thought enough has actually taken place that we would get together for another one of our chats. Sitting in for former Congressman Steve LaTourette is Matt Henkin. Matt, thanks for once again ably sitting in for Congressman LaTourette.
Always here to help.
Hope you've had a good summer so far.
I have.
Well, Congress is not back yet, but we're finally hearing some talk about what is or isn't going to be happening once Congress actually returns. And the first thing that's really I want to talk about that is, I think, the potential to kind of be a political nuclear bomb detonating is the possibility of executive action on the question of immigration by President Obama. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, a few months ago, the president sent to the Congress his proposal for about $3.7 billion in aid to address the influx in illegal immigration occurring right now on the southern border. A lot of it is children in particular who are coming from Central America, and he asked for that funding. The Senate passed a bill roughly mirroring what the president had requested, and then the House passed a bill, or tried to pass a bill, that was a little bit pared down, and they couldn't do that, so they really had to pare it down even further to placate some of the House Republicans who are very much against funding that issue. And ultimately they left at the beginning of August at an impasse without anything passing. So now the president has basically, there have been reports that the president is considering what he can do in light of the fact that nothing has happened. And one of the things that he's doing is considering possible executive action to defer removal of certain illegal immigrants, more than just the dreamers who he's already protected through his executive order. And that idea has really made many Republicans very upset. The word nuclear has kind of been used around town. And so the president, by all reports, this is just the infancy of what he's doing. He's really just planning what he can do legally and what he should do politically. Obviously, with an election only weeks away, he definitely has to kind of weigh the political cost of all those decisions. And so right now, we really aren't sure what he's going to do. But yeah, one of the things is defer action on certain immigrants, but also talking about visa allocation to help the business community, some other immigration things, and what he can do in the White House rather than using congressional action.
And some of the deferrals could impact millions and millions of immigrants that are here illegally. And we're already hearing from some of the very conservative anti-immigration House members, people are throwing around, impeachment and expanding the lawsuit. This sounds like it really could be setting the stage for some fireworks over the next couple of months here in D.C. and all across the country.
Well, I think from the president's perspective, he certainly would know that this would be a very unpopular decision with the Republicans. Obviously, some have already been talking about impeachment. He's already subject to a lawsuit from the House Republicans, and so certainly this can just add fuel to the fire on that end. But I also think there's a possibility that a lot of this is just positioning for getting the best deal possible on a continuing resolution to fund the government, which we'll talk about shortly. But
well,
and it's negotiations.
And that's a good transition. So the next issue I want to talk about isn't quite as radioactive as immigration, but there was a lot of talk about a return to regular order in the appropriations process after the Ryan Murray budget deal. And despite all the happy talk, and certainly me and Congressman LaTourette spent a lot of weeks sitting here talking about how great it was that we'd return to regular order, unfortunately, it seems like maybe regular order was overhyped. The Senate hasn't passed a single appropriations bill. The House has only passed a handful. Where are we headed?
Well, we are headed toward, I hate to break it to anybody who really had their money on regular order, we're probably going to end up with something called a continuing resolution, which is basically saying that we're not going to be able to pass our 12 separate spending bills by September 30th when the current law expires. So instead, we're just going to pass a law that for a temporary time basically keeps the current budget but prorates those dollars out to the agencies. Obviously, that's not preferable for members of Congress. It's a sign of failure. But I think that it's less of a numbers game regarding the budget deal that was reached in 2013. I think it's more about the policies that accompany spending bills. we don't just fund the agencies, we also direct them how to use those dollars. And certain activities are prohibited, some of them are mandated, and that's really where you get the most disagreement, and that's really where the regular order falls apart. The Senate hasn't passed any bills. They tried to bring 3 of the bills to the Senate floor, but really the issue was over the amendments and how long that process would take. Really, it was a fairly difficult decision, but it had to be pulled ultimately.
And these policy riders that you talk about, they have derailed kind of the regular order, but there's a possibility they could derail a continuing resolution. Shifting back for a moment to the immigration issue, we've already heard some in the House say that if President Obama acts unilaterally on immigration reform and allows millions of illegal immigrants to stay here legally, all of a sudden we have the specter again of a potential government shutdown. I don't think that we've gotten to the point where that's kind of accepted throughout GOP leadership, but it's now finally, it's out there. Absolutely it is. I think a lot of the most conservative House Republicans have already been talking about that's one thing that they would have to address through legislation, through a must-pass bill like the continuing resolution, the continuing funding bill. And so yeah, also Marco Rubio has been talking about this as well. So you've got a lot of very prominent Republicans that have already kind of put out their marker on this issue, hoping that either it would deter the president from doing it altogether or set the table for perhaps a PR battle in the case that there is any sort of real shutdown threat. Finally, and briefly, there's the issue of the Export-Import Bank. It's kind of surprising to me because a few years ago, reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank was nothing. It simply happened. There was no fanfare. This was something that just happened. Right. Unfortunately, like many things here in D.C., which was once routine, has now become a Herculean lift. Lots of conservative organizations have made opposing Export-Import Bank reauthorization their kind of cause célèbre. What do you think the prospects are for reauthorization this year in the Republican-controlled House? I think 6 months ago, it was a good political message for the Republicans to fire up their base, but now recent events have made me really question whether it can be done. Just to let everybody know, basically what this is it helps U.S. companies with their export capacity as well as just increasing employment by financing foreign buyers to purchase U.S. goods. And it is a self-sustaining program. So it costs the taxpayers no money. It's entirely a revolving credit line of about $140 billion. Yeah, it actually makes money. It returns to the Treasury.
Yeah, it makes about $1 billion a year for the government, and it helps a number of purposes: employment, exports. It also helps the foreign countries kind of prop up their own economy. So a lot of purposes served, but critics really call it a form of corporate welfare. They think it interferes in private markets. And that argument has had some legs, but it's really taken off in the past couple of months. One is the election of Kevin McCarthy to Majority Leader, the second most powerful spot in the House of Representatives, and he's ardently against the Export-Import Bank. And then also in July, some reports of cronyism, of kickbacks and some forms of corruption at the XM Bank, where about 4 officials have been accused of taking bribes in order to facilitate loans to companies, and I think that definitely really hurts the process. So it expires on September 30th, just like the government funding bill. So people are thinking, Democrats have talked about possibly attaching the XM Bank reauthorization to the CR, which could theoretically derail the CR, like we were talking about earlier. But truth be told, I think that this might not be the time to wage that battle. So I have a feeling that that the XM Bank might for a while lapse, but maybe get reauthorized down the road. But it's definitely going to be taking a very public role in the coming months.
Well, it'll definitely be something that we're paying attention to over the next couple of months.
Absolutely.
Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.